And good evening, LBE family, community, um, supporters, new friends, old friends, wherever you are in the city, in the state, in the region, in the world, East Coast, West Coast. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we go into our presentation for this evening. First of all, Sister Kara, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. How are you?
Good, thank you. I think we're probably all, for the record, maybe feeling a little anxious this evening as for we who live here in Flagstaff, fires during this time of the year sadly remind us that summer is here. And so for our viewers who are in this area or near the area of the current fire, we send out our prayers to our community family there. Tonight we're going to, before we begin, so we want to say also thank you. Friday night was the Viola Awards, and the Lived Black Experience Project was nominated for, help me out, Sister Kara, was that Community Impact?
Yes, Community Impact Organization.
Community Impact Organization. And the, I don't know, Sister Kara, what do you think about when you hear Community Impact Organization?
You know, I think the big thing that stands out to me in the nomination and in that category was just the Flagstaff community saying that this program is having an impact, and that's a beautiful thing. You know, to hear folks saying that they are learning, they're engaging, they are getting something from this program is such a powerful thing, especially as we're talking about the need for our communities to be more diverse and equitable and inclusive. And we're talking about how that's impacting everything from our schools to our jobs to everything else in between. And so for the community at large to recognize that is work that this program is doing is absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I like to say when we're doing these live streams is that our idea, our aim, our goal, our mission for doing this, bringing these sometimes difficult conversations, but sometimes triumphant and easy conversations such as what we will have this evening, but it is to enlighten, inform, and to educate others about what it is to be Black, not only here in Flagstaff, up here in our mountain town, not only in the state of Arizona, but wherever we as melanated people of African descent are in these United States of America. I know that I am still celebrating President Biden's announcement of Juneteenth now being an official holiday, and we had a wonderful time on Saturday. What say you about that, Sister Kara?
Agreed. That was absolutely phenomenal. I think we knew that the community was hungry to be able to get out and celebrate together. But even I have to say, I did not expect that many people to come through. We had at least 200 to 300 people come out and learn about, you know, what Juneteenth is, celebrate with our community, and it was just a beautiful day. And I mean, even with rain, it was a nice moment of cool, and then the event continued. So to see people that hungry to engage with the story of Juneteenth and the celebration of Juneteenth is absolutely beautiful.
It is, and it was. And I, like I said, I think I'm still in a state of celebration because, you know, when we talk about the freedom of a group of enslaved souls who received that news 2 years later, and now that we all can talk about it and feel some kind of way about it, it's just beautiful that all of the world community can now rejoice with us. And so with that being said, you know, this evening we're going to be talking about stories, the stories of these enslaved souls, how we can dig into our ancestry and find out more. And it is so important, and we have covered this topic a few times in this project about how important it is to tell our stories and what that means to us, not just as individuals, the relatives of these ancestors, but to us as a people, to have these stories to listen to. And I think for me, knowing stories about my extended family and friends and colleagues, about their ancestry, about their past, it gives me a glimpse into the personality of that individual. How do you feel about that, Kara?
I feel much the same way. I love hearing just the beauty of where we came from. It's such a wonderful thing to even be able to do that, because we know how hard it was for our families not only to stay together because of the legacy of slavery and separating families and forcing them to move apart, but finding those ways to still maintain that line of connection no matter where people were in the country is so amazing. And then to be able to pass those stories on and remind, I think that's such a beautiful thing about the African diaspora and about our people, is that ability to remind each other, this is where you came from and this is who you are.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It really is. And so that's why I'm excited this evening about having our presenter that you're going to introduce to us. And I particularly, I really admire the work that this sister has done and is doing. And I'm really excited about this evening's presentation because it connects to Flagstaff. It starts in Louisiana and it ends up here in Flagstaff, and it is connected to someone that we all know. And so that's going to come out in this presentation. I'm going to be good and not tell, but I'm really excited how the story ends up. And I have to share that this person, when I met them some years ago, I gotta share this. They were not too familiar with seafood, and I thought it odd because I knew a little bit of their history, their family history, and this is how I know DNA is real. So once this person was introduced to seafood at the very first time, and particularly, you know, we've all had fish and shrimp, but I'm talking about shellfish where you gotta crack and open. It was so natural to them. And I was like, are you sure you've never had shellfish before, and they were like, "Yep, I've never had it, but I like it." But they caught on to it, and for me, that was just a testament of how this DNA, it's in us. Mm-hmm. Those roots are in us, and those habits and abilities and capabilities. So I'm really excited about this evening's presentation. And so with that being said, Sister Kara, let's do this.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure to introduce our audience this evening to Miss Vernita Morgan, a Natchitoches, Louisiana native. Vernita Morgan of Genealogical Connections, LLC, currently serves on the Arkansas State Historic Preservation Review Board and the Southwest Arkansas Regional Archives Foundation Board. She is a past registrar of the Lineage Society, National Society United States Daughters of 1812, William C. Claiborne chapter, having joined under her third great-grandfather, Alan Demery. And she is the 2021 recipient of the Juneteenth Genealogy Award, sponsored by the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. Welcome, Ms. Morgan.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today. And it's so fitting that this topic comes when it comes. Juneteenth national holiday was just a couple of days ago. And what does it talk about it, or what is Juneteenth about? It's about celebrating the freedom of our enslaved ancestors. Mm-hmm. And so today we're going to look at a couple who was enslaved, and we're going to look at some of their descendants. And we're going to take you on a journey from Louisiana to Arizona. But hey, that journey began a little bit before Louisiana. Let's watch and see. Y'all, it was a 50-word obituary. And in that, we learned the legacy of Fred and Charlotte Humphrey. Our agenda, first we're going to dissect that 50-word article. Then we're going to start looking at the information that's given to us in the article, and we're going to look at different resources that can help us continue the journey of that couple. Finally, we're going to bring us from Louisiana to where you are in Arizona, our host. So before we began dissecting that 50-word article, I would be remiss if I did not share the importance of newspapers in historical or genealogical research. When you are researching your family history, you may want to do a search in the newspaper. There might be some valuable information in that newspaper, or several newspapers. One resource that I highly recommend that you use to determine what places you can access newspapers would be FamilySearch.org. I recommend that site because it is a free site. You do not pay a penny. You register, and then you have access to newspapers, to probate records, to census records, to death certificates, to birth certificates, to marriage licenses. You have a gamut of resources available to assist you in your genealogical journey. Family Search has a wiki, just like when we do a search for an individual or a time period, and we look at the wiki online. Family Search has its own wiki, and you can look at different resources when it as reference to newspapers. They're free, and of course there are some that are subscription based. So based on your needs, based on your preferences, you have all type of options. Now let's go ahead and dissect the 50-word article. I'm going to read this article probably a couple of times because I want you to listen to the information that is thrown at you. In 50 words, what you can learn about this couple. Here we go. Death of an aged colored woman. Charlotte Humphrey, colored, aged 91 years, died yesterday at her home in this city. She was the wife of Frederick Humphrey, who died here 6 years ago at the age of 90. The couple was brought to Louisiana from Virginia in 1849 by Colonel C.A. Thornton, father of Judge J.R. Thornton. This was an article, an obituary, in the Alexandria, Louisiana Town Talk, October 6, 1908. It was a 1908 article in the Alexandria Town Talk. There's a map of Louisiana, and you can see where Alexandria is located. It's in central Louisiana, and it's located in the parish of Rapides. All the other states have counties, but Louisiana has parishes. So Alexandria is located in the parish of Rapides. Again, 1908, death of an aged colored woman. Charlotte Humphrey, colored, aged 91 years, died yesterday at her home in this city. She was the wife of Frederick Humphrey, who died here 6 years ago at the age of 90. The couple was brought to Louisiana from Virginia in 1849 by Colonel C.A. Thornton, father of Judge J.R. Thornton. Line by line, what information can we tell? First line, Charlotte Humphrey, colored, aged. So we have the name and, of course, the ethnicity and different time periods, you know, could have been colored, Black, African-American, Negro, different words. At this period, it was colored. Next line, age 91 years, died yesterday. Okay, this was in October the 6th article, 1908. So she died yesterday. We have her date of death. And guess what? Being that this was in Louisiana, Louisiana death records don't start until about 1911, 15, between that period, when you start seeing death certificates that are held in the Louisiana archives in Baton Rouge. So this was before death certificates were actually recorded, and it's in the newspaper. That's why newspapers are so valuable. You're getting information that you would not otherwise have gotten in your vital statistics location, the archives. So, and we have her age, 91. So guess what? We can take that back and we can determine her date of birth, or year of birth, I should say. Okay. She died yesterday at her home in this city. Well, you know, this is an Alexandria, Louisiana Town Talk newspaper. So apparently she lived in Alexandria, or that area of that, you know, newspaper carries. And she died at her home. Okay, so she was married. At one point, she was married to a man by the name of Frederick Humphrey. So we know that she was a wife, and we know the name of her husband. More information. Well, it tells us her husband died 6 years ago. So now we can subtract back. If this is the year 1908 and he died 6 years ago, that means he must have died in 1902. But of course, you constantly have to check to see if this is truly a fact or not. So that's why we don't take everything at hand when we're doing genealogical research. We want to find several different references and resources that's going to validate the information that we're finding, okay? So that's just a heads up, okay? So he died 6 years ago at the age of 90. So if he died 6 years ago at the age of 90, then we know we can subtract the 6 years ago, which is 1902, and then subtract that 90 from it, and we'll have his year of birth. So do you see how we can kind of get additional information? 50-word article, a 50-word article with a title of 6. Okay, the couple was brought to Louisiana from Virginia in 1849. 3 very key pieces of information. Okay, so they migrated from Virginia to Louisiana. And when they migrated, they left Virginia, according to this article, in 1849. Okay, so at this point, we're starting to kind of get a few thoughts that maybe slavery was involved, because we're migrating. They were brought from Virginia to Louisiana. So we're starting to kind of think along those terms. And of course, with the 1849, we can, of course, subtract back to see approximately their age when they were brought from Virginia to Louisiana. And who brought them? Well, Colonel C.A. Thornton. So this person, could he have been the enslaved owner? Okay, could he have been the plantation owner? Possibly. And he was the father of J.R. Thornton. So J.R. Thornton. So we know that, his son was a judge. And we are in Alexandria, Louisiana. Was he a judge in Alexandria? Let's see. So now what do? We have this 50-word article with the title of 6. How can we use what we've read and take it further? This is what we can do. Always, census records, very valuable. Census records lets us know who was in the household, okay? The head of the household, the children in the household, any additional family members in the household, how they're related, where they were born, their age, their sex, how many years they were married, how many children were born. Different census gives us bits of information that's very helpful. Slave schedules. We can look at Thornton, slaves, can see if he's in the slave schedules. Freedmen's Bureau. Freedmen's Bureau. Freedmen's Bureau was what I consider as the bridge from slavery to freedom, as it relates to ensuring that the previously enslaved are getting wages for their work, ensuring that the previously enslaved are getting education, are getting educated. There's schools, legal marriages now. So land. So the Freedmen's Bureau occurred right at the cusp of the end of slavery, until approximately 67, 68, depending on where you live, is going to be different years. So that bit of information is very valuable, because a lot of times, if we can find our ancestor on the Freedmen's Bureau, that may give us a window as to who their plantation owner was and what the name of the plantation was also. So that is very important. Okay, succession and probate records. when someone dies, there may be wills involved. There may be, if parents die, then the children, who's going to assume the guardianship of the children. So all of that information is going to be key and helpful. Land records, death certificates. I'm going to continue on. Marriage licenses, and of course, maps. And let's not forget those Thorntons. Okay, we may not be able to go very far back on the Humphreys, but certainly we probably will be able to go pretty far back on the Thorntons. And that may give us a clue as to the journey of our enslaved ancestors prior to us actually seeing them on paper. Next, we're going to start connecting the dots. We see all of those valuable resources that are at our disposal. Let's start tapping into them. Okay. Now, that article we saw was a 1908 article from Alexandria Town Talk, 1908. Okay. So let's see. This is the 1900 census. And let's see what it says. And I put a long rectangle around Charlotte Humphrey. Okay, so it tells us that in this household in 1908, it says that Charlotte Humphrey was a widow. Okay, but if the article was dated 1908 and it told us that her husband died 6 years prior, she wouldn't have been a widow in 1900. She would have been a widow in 1902. So that's why you have to validate the information that is on newspaper articles and everywhere else. So we know now that he was already deceased by the time that this particular census was created. Okay. Over on the right, the first column, that tells us the birthplace of the individuals listed on the census. She was born in Virginia. And then the subsequent columns tells us the birthplace of your father, then the birthplace of your mother. So Charlotte indicates that she and her parents were all born in the state of Virginia. Okay, so that Virginia is consistent with that article. Remember, she and Fred were brought from Virginia to Louisiana. Okay, so just don't take one bit of resource as a fact. Compare it with other resources that will give you the same or similar type of information, and compare and contrast. Okay. So we've talked about the date of birth. According to this particular census, it states that she's 80 years old, which would indicate that she was born in 1820. However, the article told us that she died at the age, I think it was the age of 90, I think in 1908. So, or 91 or 92. So do you see that when you subtract 91 years, so she died at the age of 91. When you subtract 91 from 1908, that would give you about 1817. But suppose that that she had a birthday later, then that would make her being born in 1816. But on this 1900 census, it indicates that she was born in 1820. So that's a big difference. Okay. Date of death of Frederick. We've already mentioned that. She was a widow, so he apparently died before 1902. Okay. And then also you can consider the date of birth of Frederick as well. You can think about that also in a new light. Since the article stated that he died at the age of 96 years ago, well, we know now that he really didn't die 6 years ago. So that kind of messes up with that information that we learned from the article, because he wasn't deceased in 1902. I'm sorry, he died well before 1902. He was already deceased in the 1900 census. Okay, and of course, place of birth. Now that's a go. That's consistent. That's a go. Okay. So that was the 1900 census. As you know, the 1890 census is not available. It was burned in the Chicago fire. So the next census that we have access to, which you can find on FamilySearch.org, is the 1880 census. Now in that census, both Frederick and Charlotte are living, okay? And note, it gives the age on that 1880 census. And it gives them as being, what, 60 and 69. And look at the years. Look at Charlotte, 1820. That 1820 now is still consistent with the 1900, but not with that Alexandria, Louisiana Town Talk newspaper article of her obituary. So the older the resource, I would say the highly likely that information is more plausible than something that comes out in the future. So she probably was born around about 1820. Okay. And right here, Fred's, it wasn't that far off with the 1811. So I created a chart so we can kind of look at this information bit. So in the 1908 article, I have Frederick's date of birth, death, and Charlotte's date of birth. Okay. The 1900 census, all the way to the right, what I did is I looked at the greatest range from the different pieces of information that we found their birth, or in Fred's case, death. So the biggest range, or the biggest discrepancy, was of course Charlotte's date of birth, which was 4 years. Frederick's wasn't so bad. It's only about 2-year difference. And it was consistent that they're just like this 1880 census, born in the state of Virginia. Frederick also says both of his parents were born in Virginia too. Okay, so we are just trying to see what information that we can find from that 50-word article. This is where that 50-word article is taking us. Okay, we're still in Rapides Parish, and this is Ragully area. It's a small area, rural community. Okay, now here's another type of resource that is at our disposal at FamilySearch.org. It's the Freedmen's Bureau records, and you can find the Freedmen's Bureau records at several other locations on the internet. The National Archives website has the Freedmen's Bureau information. Internet Archives has Freedmen's Bureau information. The online virtual archives also has Freedmen's Bureau records. So you can access Freedmen's Bureau records in several different locations. So this is, again, Louisiana, Rapides Parish. And we have Omega Plantation. And where did I get Omega Plantation from? I got Omega Plantation from a marriage license that I found of the daughter of Frederick and Charlotte Humphrey. And I'm going to show that to you a little later. But you're going to see that they were married on the Omega Plantation. So that's why I chose to look for Omega Plantation when I went to the Freedmen's Bureau records. So for Louisiana, the labor contracts were very well laid out in the records. It is in order, alpha order, by parish. And within each parish, at the beginning of each parish, you'll have an alphabetical listing of the plantations. And so you can easily access, well, with a little time, of course, access the plantation and look and see who was on that plantation. So with the Omega Plantation, we found C.A. Thornton. C.A. Thornton being the owner, okay? So remember that name that we saw in that article? That's the same individual, C.A. Thornton. So yes, he owned this plantation. This is December the 6th, 1865 contract. And I just transcribed a little bit of the contract. We, the undersigned freedmen and women, now on the above named plantation, do hereby contract with C.A. Thornton, the owner of said plantation, to work for him as paid planters. This contract made and entered unto this the 6th day of December, A.D. 1865. Okay. And I said, note, the 13th Amendment was ratified on the 18th of December, 1865. So on the right, that's that's the actual contract, the actual Freedmen's Bureau contract of C.A. Thornton's. And at the bottom, you see the names of and their marks, their X marks of the individuals who have signed with their X the contract that they will work for C.A. Thornton. They will work for pay, okay? And the Freedmen's Bureau was set up to ensure that the new freedmen will receive wages for the work that they do. I blew up just the part where we saw Frederick Humphrey, or Fred Humphrey, Charlotte, and Mary and Alfred, who are a couple of their children. Okay, so that was the Freedmen's Bureau contract. We saw census records. Now that 50-word article is taking us to the slave schedules for C.A. Thornton. Now that we know that C.A. Thornton indeed owned Omega Plantation. So if you look at the slave schedules, this is for the year 1850 and the year 1860. We see that in 1850, 60, we'll go 1860 because we kind of going backwards. We saw the Freedmen's Bureau, and that was 1865, December of 1865. Now, this is 1860, 5 years prior. So they were slaves on the C.A. Thornton, under C.A. Thornton's Omega Plantation. And it tells us how many slaves C.A. Thornton has. And if you actually delve into the record, they'll also let you know the number of slaves that fell under a certain gender and a certain age. So they list that. They don't list names. The only time you'll see names listed on the 1860 slave schedule is when that slave is 100 or more years old. Okay. And then if you go back to the 1850 slave schedules, he didn't have as many slaves. So apparently with time from 1850 to 1860, he increased the number of slaves that he had. Okay. Another article that was quite interesting was the obituary of C.A. Thornton. Okay. So C.A. Thornton, he died after the Emancipation Proclamation was activated. He died in 1886. Let's see what his obituary tells us. It tells us that he was born in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. It tells us he was born in 1813. And then where I highlighted this, in the year 1836, he moved from Virginia to Mississippi. And then if you skip down, I highlighted, and then in the winter of 1849, he moved from that parish he moved, excuse me, his family to that parish, which is Rapides Parish in Louisiana. So when Fred and Charlotte left Virginia, they technically didn't leave Virginia in 1849. They left in 1836, went with Thornton to Mississippi, Wilkinson County, Mississippi, and then in 1849 went up to Rapides Parish, Louisiana. So there was a dip in there. We would not have known that Wilkinson County information had it not been for this newspaper article. We would not have known that. So that newspaper article shared that very important information with us. Also, we see who C.A. Thornton married. He married one of the Randolph daughters, one of Peter Randolph's daughters. Peter Randolph was a judge in Mississippi. And of course, they were very well-to-do and had a very significant plantations. Okay. So right here, I'm just showing you how you have to really be very careful with the information that you're given in your article, and the information that you accept. So you have to do a lot of comparative analysis. Okay. Further on in the obituary, it lets us know that he had a son, Judge J.R. Thornton. Further confirmation that this is the same C.A. Thornton that was listed in Charlotte's obituary in the Town Talk 1908 of October the 6th. So that was a true statement. Okay. So I went back to Wilkinson County, Mississippi, and I looked to see if C.A. Thornton owned a plantation in 1840, because remember, he's in Wilkinson County. He left in 1836. He left Virginia. He went to Wilkinson County. And then in 1849, he left Mississippi, and he went up to Mississippi, or he may have left some other place. But we know in 1849, he went to Rapides Parish. So yes, we found him in Wilkinson, Mississippi. He owned 58 slaves. So you see, over the course of the years, he increased the number of slaves that he owned. From 1840 to 1850, it was a 26% jump. And from 1850 to the next decade, a 23% jump. So I was interested in what was going on with the Thorntons, because I knew if I found the Thorntons, I might find my Humphreys. And one interesting thing I learned about the Thorntons, C.A. Thornton was married to the Randolph daughter, Cornelia Randolph. Well, like I said, her family was pretty well-to-do. The Nottoway Plantation, which is a very elaborate, architecturally significant plantation home in the state of Louisiana, was owned by Cornelia's brother, John Randolph was his name. And actually, the judge, J.R. Thornton, who was C.A. Thornton's son, was kind of named after the owner of Nottoway Plantation. So that was pretty interesting. So I learned that in the obituary of C.A. Thornton's son. Okay. It said that he was born in Nottoway Plantation. He was born in what, 1846. So does that mean that they left Wilkinson County, Mississippi, and then first went to Bayou Gula in Iberville Parish, Louisiana, and then went to Rapides Parish? That's what it looks like. Okay. But I need more information to confirm that. So I'm not going to take that yet, because they could have left Wilkinson County and gone straight to Rapides Parish, Louisiana. In doing this research, I learned that slave owners had several different plantations, and they had, and in a different outside location, they had their homes. So I don't know if he took the Humphreys with him to Nottoway Plantation. I don't know if his wife, Cornelia, went to Nottoway Plantation to have her baby. So I'm not sure about that. So I'm not going to take that as fact as to the Humphreys being there, but I'm going to definitely keep that in the forefront of my mind, knowing that there's a strong possibility that they could have gone there. Okay. Also, what I've learned in Judge J.R. Thornton's obituary was that he was involved in the Colfax riot. And he was a member of the White Camellia, which was very connected to the Ku Klux Klan. So that information kind of gave me an idea of possibly how the life of Fred and Charlotte Humphrey, how it may have been. Okay, so that was quite, that was a sad bit of information that I found. But it's good to know, and it gives you the context and the seriousness and it continues the story, and it also offers the room for you to embrace their resilience, what they went through, what they had to travel through, what the treatment, and that they lived beyond all of that, and then they still survived, and they still did, and they still accomplished. Okay. One interesting bit of information about the Thorntons is that they are descendants of the first president of the United States, George Washington. George, dad, was Augustine Washington Sr. He was married twice. So George's stepson, Augustine Washington Jr., is the direct ancestor of C.A. Thornton and Judge Thornton. And I found validation in newspapers and in books. So that was quite interesting. And of course, you know, George Washington is Virginia. So finally, we are going to connect Louisiana to Arizona. Are you ready? Remember I told you about Omega Plantation? Yes. Well, Fred and Charlotte's daughter, Rebecca Humphrey, was married to a man by the name of Elijah Young, and he was a Reverend Elijah Young eventually. So this is their marriage license. They got married in 1871. Okay. Now we're going to kind of go forward to the future. So we're in Louisiana still. We're in Louisiana right here in 1871. We know that we came over from Virginia. Right now, we're in Louisiana. Okay, and this is just the second part of their marriage license. And note their marks at the bottom. Okay, one thing I like is they were born on the date of my birthday, but not the year, July 6th. Well, that's when the paperwork was done. They were actually married on the 8th. Okay. Okay, so 1880 census for Elijah and Rebecca. I circled Adlaria because that is Addie. Okay, her nickname is Addie, and we're going to kind of follow Addie. We're going to follow Addie to Arizona. At this point, Addie was just 2 years old in 1880, Rapides Parish, Louisiana. Oops. I'm sorry about this, but this is, it was a little lopsided. This is Addie's marriage license to a man by the name of Alec Dorsey, okay? And they got married I think it's December the 19th in 1894. Okay. In the 1900 census, Addie and Alex, they'd been married, what, about 6 years, well, 5 or 6 years, as the census states. At this time, she had had 4 children. Addie had had 4 children, but only 3 of them were living. So somewhere along the way, she might have had a stillborn or miscarriage, or the child may have died of disease, some type of disease. But there were 3 living children in the household, Mary, Samuel, and Alex Jr., named after his dad. And a couple other people were boarders in that household in 1900. We're still in Rapides Parish. Okay. 10 years later, 1910, we're still in Rapides Parish. There's Alex and Addie. Notice that those 3 children that were in the household 10 years prior has expanded. Okay. And at this point, they said that they've been married about 16 years. And y'all, these years can be off from census to census. Spellings can be off. You just have to be patient and be creative in your searches. She has 8 living children at this time. Okay. And if you look all the way to the right, you'll see that Alex was a day laborer for a log company. So he worked for a log company in Rapides Parish, Louisiana. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, this shouldn't be the next slide, but okay. Let me see. This shouldn't be the next slide. But we're going to go ahead on. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Alex and Addie. In and we see Alex was a logger. In 1923, late 1923, the rural communities, the logging communities in Rapides Parish was really having a struggle with production, because they were running out of wood, out of trees. So the owners of a particular log company by the name of McNary decided to look elsewhere for production. That's where Arizona came to be. He looked over in Arizona and he looked at Fort Apache Indian Reservation area, and there was a sawmill there, and that owner was interested in selling. And actually, the area was called Cooley, Arizona. He was interested in selling his sawmill, and so McNary decided to purchase that sawmill, and he would transfer his workers from the rural community in McNary, Louisiana. He would transfer them to that area in Arizona, Cooley at the time. Now, that took a lot of course, planning, a lot of money, but references that I've found has stated that upwards of 800 individuals were transported by train from the rural communities out of Louisiana, the logging community, into that Fort Apache Indian Reservation area, okay? Cooley, Arizona. And that area was a part of 2 counties in Arizona, Apache, and Navajo. So those individuals migrated there in December of 1923. And thus was the migration of the Dorseys from Louisiana and several other families from Louisiana to Arizona. Now, they got there in 1923. Now, so if you look at the around 1924, there's a population of over 800 individuals in the county, in Apache County. Okay, prior to their move in 1920, there were only about 14 individuals, according to the U.S. Census, in Apache. So in walks 1924, and over 800 African Americans, some Caucasians, of course, and Native Americans are living in Apache County, working at the sawmill. Now, within about a year, that changed. Several individuals felt that they didn't like the climate. They had challenges with the weather, and they went back to Louisiana. Of course, there's always death involved. Some individuals, hey, they didn't want to live in Apache County. They wanted to live elsewhere. So they moved to other parts of Arizona. And then some even moved to California. And I'm sure, and that's the major reasons why there was basically a huge exodus from Apache County within about a year after about 1925. And then look at what happened by 1930. You went from 14 to over 800, now down to 338 individuals. There was a significant population decrease. Okay. So the African Americans lived in a section of when they moved, lived in a section called Milltown, and the Caucasian Americans lived in a section called Hilltown. So you can imagine that there was still segregation involved. In Milltown, the houses were really close to each other. In Hilltown, they were spread out, lots of yard. Milltown, where the African Americans lived, the nickname was the Quarters. It was located east of the plant, the logging plant. Where the whites lived was kind of on top, on a hill up from the plant. So you still saw that segregation after the move. Now, according to the U.S. Census figures, Black populations of communities where McNairy Blacks immigrated to. So they didn't really like living in Apache County, apparently. So they decided, let me go to Flagstaff. Let me go to Winslow. And as you can see, other parts that they moved from 1920 to 1930, you can see how Tucson, huge increase. Phoenix, huge increase. A lot of those individuals were individuals who left, who didn't want to live in the area of McNairy, and they wanted to perhaps, have a better home, a better way of life. And I did a quick search, non-scientific, quick search in Ancestry.com, and I was just curious. I looked at the 1920 census and I looked at the 1930 census. I didn't look at race. I just wanted to know people who were born in Louisiana in 1920 who lived in Apache. How many people? Well, just doing a non-scientific quick search on Ancestry.com, there were only 14 people who were born in Louisiana that were living in Apache in 1920. So 1920, 14 of the residents in Apache were originally born in Louisiana. Now and then in 1930, look at that, how many of those individuals who in 1930, who were still living in Apache, how many of them were born in Louisiana? So this tells you that, of course, a lot of the residents of these particular counties migrated over from Louisiana. Okay. Yeah, okay. So now, that was 1920, 1930. Now we have the death of our beloved mother, Rebecca Humphrey. And she's seated. Her daughter, Addie, who married Alexander Dorsey, Addie, is standing. So if you look at, this is her death certificate, another resource that is valuable and available to us. Okay, so this is where she died, in Flagstaff, Arizona. She died on January the 30th, 1930. She was the wife of Reverend Elijah Young, and she was widowed. So we know Elijah died before 1930. Okay. She was born in Omega, Louisiana. Well, we know that she was born on Omega Plantation. So this is what Addie, who was the format, told the individual who documented this on the certificate. And what also was very, very, very good for family history research, and we always hope that this occurs, is we see what the maiden name of her mother was and the place of birth of her parents. So that gives us another level of confirmation. In both cases, Addie informed the individual who completed this form that both parents of Rebecca Humphrey Young were born in the state of Virginia. Her dad was Fred Humphrey, which we know. He was born in Richmond. And her mother's maiden name was Taylor. So not just Charlotte Humphrey now, it's Charlotte Taylor Humphrey. And she was born in Culpeper, Virginia. So that is such valuable information. It goes on to tell, of course, the undertaker and the cause of death, bronchopneumonia. But death certificates, when they are completed, gives us valuable information. When historical, family history, genealogical, all of the above. Okay, and this lets us see where these areas are, from a current map to a map around the time when they were born. So Charlotte Taylor Humphrey now was born in Culpeper, and that's where that's located. Charles Thornton, on his death certificate, it was stated he was born in Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania. And Addie informed on Rebecca's death certificate that he was born in Richmond. And so you see how those areas are located. So it now speaks from a genealogical standpoint. Okay, so when did they all come together? When, did Charles purchase, or perhaps there was a secession? So that is going to be some future information and future research that we need to do. Okay, so this is just a recap. Virginia, to Wilkinson County, to Rapides, and to Flagstaff. Okay. Now, just wanted to bring to your attention that, okay, this is the 1930 census. And remember, Rebecca died in 1930. She died right before the census was taken. And if you look at the top Flagstaff, in 1930, we know they were in Flagstaff. So they probably did migrate, and they did migrate when the over 800 individuals migrated into Cooley, which became McNairy, Arizona in 1923, and began working and was there in 1924. Well, by 1930, they're living in Flagstaff. You see Alex and Addie right there, and you see their children. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Ollie, one of their daughters. She's 14 on this census. Okay. And if you look next door, there's a Jessie Mae Evans and Bernard Evans. Jessie is another daughter of Alex and Addie's. So she was living next door to them in 1930 in Flagstaff. So what can you learn from a 50-word article? You can learn that a 50-word article can take you from enslavement to empowerment. We're going to talk a little bit about Ollie. Meet Ollie Dorsey. Ollie was a Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveters were women who worked on those warships during World War II. There were so many men that were at war, someone had to do the welding on those ships. That's what Ollie did. Ollie was from Louisiana. Ollie migrated to Flagstaff, Arizona. She graduated high school in Flagstaff, Arizona. And in an article in the Sacramento Bee, 1941, we find the reason why Addie decided to move to California and become a Rosie the Riveter. She said, I wanted to help bring the boys home, my boys. You see, she had three brothers that served in World War II. So she wanted to do her part, and she did her part by leaving Flagstaff, going to California, and becoming a Rosie the Riveter. Excuse me. It was my pleasure to attend the dedication, the memorial dedication of the Rosie the Riveters in the year 2000 in Richmond, California. Ollie was being recognized along with several hundred former Rosies, but also in attendance was a little lady by the name of Bethina Rogers Moore. Well, Ollie is my cousin, my mom's mom, first cousin, actually, my grandmother, our maternal grandmother's first cousin. Bethina is my maternal grandfather's sister. So she's my great aunt on my mom's dad's side. So both of them actually worked on the same ship, but they worked during different shifts. They both migrated from Louisiana and ended up in this area working as a Rosie the Riveter. Both were welders, worked on the same ship, never met until the day of that dedication, and I introduced both of them. Both of those ladies were in their 80s at that time. Y'all, this was in the month of October. Cousin Ollie died in the month of December. But I'm thankful that she lived to see and to be honored for her work on those warships. Cousin Ollie was very, very early on in her life. She was very involved, very involved. This, and she was very involved in her Democratic Party. So she was invited to go to DC. This was a menu from the House of Representatives restaurant, signed by her California 7th District representative at the time, Jeffrey Colin. This was in 1967. Okay. He wrote her a letter in 69. She was a delegate. She's the second on the left, delegate to the Democratic Convention. Very active, very active. After after World War II ended and she was no longer working on the warships, she became a postal clerk and became very active working with the Democratic Party. Following Jeffrey Cohen, he was succeeded by Ron Dellums, and of course, currently we have Barbara Lee in office. 35, this is a newspaper that lets us know that Ollie graduated from high school. Okay, and they in the article it says flags that there were about 33 seniors who were graduating from the Flagstaff High School. This is her husband, Mr. Bruce C. Hawkins. Okay, so now we went from Virginia to Wilkinson County, Mississippi, Rapides Parish, Louisiana, Flagstaff, which is Coconino, I hope I pronounced that correct, County, Arizona, then to Berkeley, California. A 50-word article can take us from the antebellum to American Airlines first class attendant. Meet Joan Dorsey, the second great-granddaughter of Frederick and Charlotte Taylor Humphrey. She was the first African-American flight attendant and supervisor for American Airlines. And it took newspapers where we find all types of valuable information about her being the first, but also about some of her experiences. One of her interesting jobs was when she worked on the charter flight for Hubert Humphrey, who was Lyndon Johnson's vice president-to-be. She worked with him for the entire campaign. Humphrey was one of the main authors of the Civil Rights Act. Imagine that experience and what was going through Joan's mind being in that environment. She upheld her own and she made us proud. And we are thankful that she was the one to represent us as the first. A 50-page article can take you from the plantation to public housing, then to public office. Meet Coral Evans, the third great-granddaughter of Frederick and Charlotte Taylor Humphrey. Coral Evans, unseated in 2016, the previous mayor to become the first African-American female mayor of any city in the state of Arizona. So happens that that city was the city where her family migrated from Louisiana to Arizona to Flagstaff, Arizona. Our very own Coral Evans, the third great-granddaughter of Frederick and Charlotte Taylor Humphrey out of Virginia. Coral decided that she wanted to run again after her first experience in 2016, and she ran again in 2018. And at that time, she was unopposed. So apparently, she was doing what she needed to do in order to stay in office and not have any competition. She was unopposed. She decided not to run again. She decided, hey, I want to be a representative. So she ran for the office of representative, but she didn't get that. But where there is one door closed, another door opens. Mark Kelly, Arizona's United States Senate, wanted individuals to help him with transitioning into his office. Of the 13, he selected Coral Evans, the third great-granddaughter of Frederick and Charlotte Taylor Humphrey, was asked to serve in that capacity. And she is, and she did. Are there any questions? It has been a pleasure to discuss this family history research with you. It is very important to know your background, to know where you come from, to know your people. And that will help you really position yourself for the future. Today is a special day, by the way. Today is a very special day. It is Coral Evans and her twin, Ben Evans' birthday today. And what a day to celebrate, to get information about your family history on your birthday. Happy, happy, happy birthday. Would you like me to stop sharing, or what would you like me to do? Hello?
Here we are.
Okay.
I was just saying,
sharing, or
yeah, no, we're good. We so now we took the PowerPoint down, so we're officially in our Q&A session. I was on mute, but I was saying, wow, wow, wow. I don't know, Sister Kara, where do we begin? Do we have questions or comments? What do we have?
Yeah, you know, for me, going into this conversation, besides, first of all, starting off with a happy birthday to Madam Mayor Coral Evans and her brother, in listening to your presentation, it's very clear that genealogy is your wheelhouse and your passion and your calling. And it's such a beautiful calling to have, to be, we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, pursuing ancestry, sharing legacy, and unraveling these family histories. And this clearly is not work for the faint of heart. And I have a question about that in a minute. But first, I would just like to hear, how did you come to this field and what drew you to genealogy?
Oh, good question. A lot of genealogists will probably echo what I'm saying now. Roots. Mm-hmm. And not really the movie, not really, I'm not going to say Roots. Roots is what sparked my mom's interest. And I was very young at the time, and so I couldn't stay at the house by myself. So I had to go with her when she went to the library to research. And so she let me roll the microfilm, and that was so fun. And it was fun to say, oh, there it is, Mom, to point out when I find something. And I like that feeling. And it's curiosity. And so as I got older, I didn't have to accompany my mom to the library to do. I was interested and curious, and I yearned to learn a little bit more on my own. So that's what it was kind of by chance that my interest grew. I'm math. My background is I'm a math professor, so that's my background. It has nothing to do with history, but this has really opened the door to a little increase in history, but definitely family history. There's a lot of logic and a lot of puzzle completing involved when it comes to, putting the pieces together and making the story make sense and validating information and or disproving information. All of that is very interesting to me. Talking to old people, going to cemeteries, that is going to the courthouse, going to museums, you know, spending all day in the genealogy room, going to the National Archives, watching webinars and learning about DNA. Mm-hmm. All of that is very interesting to me. And I know it's not interesting to everybody. And sometimes I feel like I'm pushing it on people. But let me tell you, I see it as a ministry at this point. Mm-hmm. I teach. I've had former students to approach me. I'm thinking of one in particular who was adopted. I was able to connect him with his birth family. And it was a positive, for the most part, it was a positive experience. I've been able to, connect families, siblings, all of that. I see that as a ministry. I bet cannot sing, but I can find somebody.
Absolutely. And speaking about your ministry, this truly is your ministry. And a lot of people think, ministry is I have to know how to sing or preach, or go out and be a missionary. But there are so many different facets to the ministry. And when you say that, I recall the scripture that we perish for lack of knowledge. And so when we pair that with the fact that we know that we cannot go forward, at least successfully, if we don't know what our past is. And so you are bringing God's people into the knowledge of themselves. So truly, this is a ministry, and it's a remarkable one indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Kara?
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a little bit because it's a beautiful ministry. And one of the things that I find so challenging in this field, particularly when it comes to Black genealogy, is that there is so much that you have to run up against to get to where you have this information. Even in listening to you unravel that 50-word obituary, it was having to validate dates, having to confirm that these are the right names, it's the right spelling, looking at the census records, seeing that there's 2 or 3 different spellings of the same last name and trying to track, is this the same person or am I now on somebody else's trail? What I found so interesting was that in preparing for this session and looking up names like Charlotte Humphrey or Fred Humphrey, I found nothing. It wasn't until you were, talking about the actual obituary that I was able to find the link for that. And for like a week, trying to find some of the information that we were going to be talking about to formulate some questions, I didn't find anything. When you reference the name of Judge John Thornton and Colonel Thornton, in 5 minutes, I looked them up and found not only them, but found their ancestors, found their descendants, found some very interesting things with some of their descendants. But overall, that does not seem accidental or incidental, that it would be so easy to find those particular figures in these stories and so hard to unravel the stories of the formerly enslaved. So I'm wondering for you, what does that tell you about the place of Black genealogy in American history? Why is it so hard for us to unravel the truth of our stories and our ancestral history?
For one, you know, when a person has a head start, sometimes it takes a little longer for you to catch up to them. Mm-hmm. And it depends on what you have with you that will determine whether you even catch up with them. Mm-hmm. So when you look at so many years of not having education, of being enslaved, of not being a legal person per se, not having marriages acknowledged because you're not a true 100% person or seen as that legally, then that's going to put you at a disadvantage. And so, of course, we stress from the genealogical standpoint that Freedmen's Bureau is basically probably the first place that you may find some information on your ancestor or previously enslaved ancestor. And of course, following that, you probably will find someone in your family in the 1870 census, because that's post-Emancipation Proclamation. So from 1870 on, you will more than likely find some information. But just like you said, it took you less than probably one search to find information on C.A. Thornton. Documentation. As we started getting increased education, then we started writing books and documenting and writing in our Bibles. Joining different societies, like lineage societies, putting that information out there so that it would be easily accessible. When you look at 1870 as opposed to now, I'm sure a lot of African Americans are now having more wills. And so as we, over time start documenting, then I think that information will be readily available for someone in the future who is trying to research us. It's just, of course, we have that, what we call brick wall, that is going to be very challenging because we didn't have access to writing and reading and documentation and paper and things of that nature. But even now, I don't know how many, for instance, funeral homes actually keep records of where people are buried in cemeteries, something like that. Like if someone doesn't have a headstone, where is that person, 10 years down the line? How can I find that person if they didn't have a headstone? Yeah. Is that information being documented? I would gather if you ask 10 different funeral homes, I would think a few of them would actually have a map that would have that location. We have to, start keeping better records and records with a little bit more, information in them. We need to start writing our histories. And then that's one thing I'm so happy. In September, I joined the African American Genealogical and Historical Society of Chicago. They basically motivated and challenged me to get out there and start presenting. And now I'm supposed to be writing up what I presented. So I have to write this up. And I'm so glad that see, I'm a math person. So you know what I feel about writing, right? So I have to write, because I know if I don't, who's gonna ever see it? Who will, if I do all of this work, why?
Well, I would say that the why is because this is your calling. And I honor you even as a mathematician, but to be a genealogist, you know, in our African culture, you would be the griot, the one who keeps the records of the tribe of that particular village. And then you go further. The calling is you not only did it for your family, but you're helping others to do it as well. So that is a great calling. We're at the end, but of our presentation, but I do have one question because, you know, we do this, you know, to enlighten, inform, and educate. And so I'm wondering, you know, when I'm thinking about our future generations, like, you know, I really, I think that I call her my niecey, Coral's daughter, Destiny. Like maybe she will be the next griot in the family to work with you and to carry on and continuing to research the family's history and to be the keeper of that history. And so do you know if how can this be a career, I guess is what just simply put comes to mind. Is this something that one can have a lucrative career as a genealogist?
Yes, yes, there are several. I would say for someone who's starting young, you know, I would say to probably seek an area like library science or archival science, maybe with a minor in genealogical studies, and start, you know, gathering your information and putting it in a PowerPoint so that you'll be ready to present at a moment's notice. Also, I would recommend that if you want to, you know, do this full time, I think that if a person specializes in a particular area and starts getting, you know, focuses on that area that's not very well, that's traveled, then that person would become the, you know, the key person, the go-to person. So I would, you know, do my research to see what gaps are in the literature, in the genealogical literature. Where are the gaps? Where can you not find very much information? Where's very little known? And you be the one to fill that gap, and then you'll be that expert person.
Absolutely. And that is so true, Sister Vernita, because coming from the sea islands of Georgia, I've watched so many European Americans come with my records, that the first family lineage, the first history that we learned outside of what we already knew came from a European American genealogist who was working on their PhD at Harvard and came with all of this information. And then I have 4 books written on my family that were not written by us. And so I'm very inspired, you know, by what you are doing. And because I know I'm very familiar with the work and the time and effort that it takes to do this. And so to you, I say thank you and bless you for what you are doing, and may you go as far is far in what you're doing, because you are what we need, especially in this day and time. So it is no coincidence that you should end up being our guest today as we culminate the Juneteenth weekend. So I thank you. Sister Kara, what say you?
Well, you know, in thinking about that importance of you know, your question of can this be a career, I think of, you know, the work that you did, Ms. Morgan, in finding all this information. And before I go on, I just want to check, is it Ms. Morgan or Dr. Morgan, or I want to make sure
Morgan.
You the, okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I'm giving you the proper due credit. But the work that you're doing to do this genealogy, I think of folks like Alex Haley, of Dr. Gates and the work that he's done, of Alela Bundles and the work that she did in uncovering the story of Madam C.J. Walker. So for me, the big question is, and for us, I think it's obvious, but I think for others, it's an important thing for them to hear, is why is this work so important? Why is it important for us to dive in and do this research and get these stories and not only learn them for ourselves, but to write them down?
So that you can share, so that you have something to talk about, so that you have a platform to stand on, so that you can, when you want to give up, you can think about that ancestor who didn't give up.
That's it.
So that you can know that you can be anything you want to be, because you see the conditions that they lived under.
Yeah.
It is important to share this with your children. Very important to share this with the younger generation, the older generation too, who don't know.
That's right.
It is very important. Watch their eyes when you tell them some stories. You know what? And all stories aren't good stories. We don't need to sugarcoat. We don't need to sugarcoat history. History is not something that's sugarcoated. Okay? It's got some salt in there, and it's got a little pepper in there and everything else. So we need to give all the seasonings on the plate, because that's what life is all about. So, you know, please, sir, please, ma'am, you know, consider spending a little time learning about your history and sharing it. And several ways to share these days: blogs, you know, writing books, journal articles, Facebook. It's so many ways you can share history.
Absolutely. And what I hear you saying, that knowledge of self, that so many great ones before us, Marcus Garvey talked a lot about how important it was to know thyself. You know, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz talked a lot about how important it was to know thyself. Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, and the list could go on and on about how important. And this is a message. The message that you're giving today is just simply know thyself. And if I know for a fact that knowing where you come from helps you, the individual, to know what it is that you're made of, and as you said, where it is that you can go, which leads to an endless road of possibilities. And so we do.
You know what? And it's important and it's very impactful to realize that your family history is a part of this American history, and that you played a role just as much, if not more, than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the historical clippings all along the way of where you fit.
Absolutely.
So you are a part of American history. You may not have learned that in school, but you can learn it now.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know that I know we're going to have you back. There needs to be a part 2 on exactly how do you begin, where do you start.
I would love to.
So we'd love to have you back. We thank you so much. You've truly been a blessing to us. Sister Kara, what do we have coming up?
Well, first of all, thank you again, Dr. Morgan, for that amazing presentation. That was phenomenal, and that's exactly the sort of conversation that we're here for. Coming up on Wednesday of this week, we are going to have another barbershop talk where we will bring together several male voices to talk about the misperception in the United States that Black men do not care about their children or are not present in their children's lives. We know that this is not true. All of us have had a father's influence or the influence of an uncle, a cousin, a friend, and so forth in our lives. So many of those that are going to be on the panel are in one way or another fathers to young Black children and young Black men who are growing up to be the future fathers of our community. So we invite folks to join us for that session on Wednesday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. That conversation will be facilitated by Mr. Jermaine Barkley, and we hope that you'll join us for that. Then coming up on Sunday, June 27th, we have the next session of our Read It series on Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison and The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. We will be having a presentation by Dr. Margaret Boatwright and an opportunity for folks to ask questions and engage with the books that were read for the month of June. As always, at the end of this presentation, we want to remind folks that this project is dedicated to fully engaging the community in all aspects of the Live Black experience and facilitating community dialogues regarding it that lead to mutual understanding, respect, and reconciliation. We're housed in the historic Murdoch Community Center, which is located on the site of the old Dunbar Elementary School. Dunbar was desegregated almost 2 years prior to Brown versus the Board of Education, and the school system here was held up by the NAACP nationally as a model for education. By taking a few minutes to complete the survey that will be shared in the comments of this conversation, you are helping us to continue to provide the community with relevant and timely programming. And finally, if you enjoy the programming that's brought to you by the Murdoch Community Center, we ask that you consider helping us to continue this work with a monetary donation. The funds that you provide for this project are in support of the Murdoch Community Center and the Southside Community Association, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. You can donate by going to the link that will also be provided in the comments or scanning the QR code on your screen.
Well, this is a beautiful ending to a beautiful presentation. It has truly been one that has touched the soul and spirit. And before we end, Sister Vernita, you are so humble, and that's a trait that I see in the Dorseys. And but we as a people have got to begin to acknowledge our greatness and show respect for the work that you've put in And you are Dr. Vernita Morgan, and we respect you and esteem you highly in that right. So I'm going to, if you do not mind, refer to you as Sister Dr. Vernita. And thank you so much for being with us. And I'm happy to hear that you would love to come back, and we would love to have you come back. And bless you. And so Flagstaff, and bless you too, Sister Kara. And so as we come to the end of another presentation on what it is to be Black in Flagstaff, in Arizona, in America, we thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you back again at our next live stream. And until then, go in grace.